A side note, since this video covers up many topics, if you want to jump to a certain topic, you can just find the timestamps in the description box. So to get started, once you open the program, you're going to land on this page. You will be able to see if you want to create a new workbook or the templates, and we will go through them. So if I'm just going to be selecting blank workbook, so we can just get familiar with the program. So simply a workbook is the Microsoft Excel file, and we call it a workbook because just like in a book, you have different sheets. In Microsoft Excel, you can have multiple sheets. So you can see here, sheet 1, 2, 3, etc. And the sheet that you will be selecting is called the working sheet. As you can see, it's a simple looking tables program. It's made out of columns and it's made out of rows. One of the most amazing thing in Excel is that each cell has a name. So what do I mean by this? If I select the mouse in any cell, you will notice that the name of the cell will appear here in the top left corner. So the cell that we are in is called D4. It would always start with the column, then the row. The columns are in alphabetical order, so A, B, C, D, etc. And the rows are in number order, so 1, 2, 3, etc. So if I would select this cell, it would be called D4. If I wanted to go to a certain cell, so let's assume I'm talking to my colleague, and my colleague says, listen, in the cell K15, there's a problem in the formula. Instead of me just digging and looking for it, I can just go there, type K15, click enter, and it will take me directly to that cell. This also applies if you have a set of cells or like a series of cells. So in this scenario, my colleague told me, listen, we have a problem in the numbers from B5 to D12. So I can write B5 column to D, what we said, 12. So just for the sake of this example, you're going to see that Excel have highlighted from B5 to D12. Moving on, we will see that the program is made out of tabs on top. So we have the home, insert, page layout, formulas. And honestly, nowadays, because Excel have advanced so much and it is still advancing, it's pretty much straight English. So if I would go to home, and especially if you use like Microsoft Word or any of the other programs, you're going to be pretty familiar with it. So if I am in this cell and I go to home, I'm going to be just writing my name just to have it as a reference. And I select the cell. Just like in any other Office program, I can change the font if I would like to. I can change its size, make it bigger, make it smaller, make it bold, make it italic, make it underlined. Even I can add borders, so I can add thick borders around the cell. Now, it does not show because it looks like it has taken 3 cells. In reality, it is just in one cell. How do I know this? When I select the cell, I will see all its content is written here. And if I make the column wider, I'll be able to see that it just fits in one cell. Now, if we click Ctrl Z, which is undo, or if you want to, you can just select it from here. So here you have the undo, and here you have the redo. Like if you want to go a step forward or a step backwards in the things that you were doing. And if you want to see the history, it's worth mentioning that you can click on this arrow and you can see all the adjustments. So if you want to go back in the adjustments that you have done and you want to go back to just typing, or before even typing, we have missed it. Yeah, okay, this way. To that point where I've just written my name in the cell. Now moving on, this is where you can fill the cell with different colored backgrounds to segregate the cells depending on their content. You can also change the color of the font inside the cell. You can align it, whether you want to align it to the center. I'm just going to make this bigger so we can just see the difference when we're aligning it in the middle or the center, aligning it to the left, aligning it to the right. And even if the cell was actually, the row was bigger, I can align it in the middle, on the top, or the bottom. So depending on whatever works with you or the type of content that you're trying to show, you can align it the way that you like to. A worthy note here is that in any part of Excel, regardless the tab, you're going to be seeing a right arrow in the bottom right corner. So I'll find it here, I'll find it here, I'll find it here. I call this the advanced menu or the extra menu. What do I mean by that? So here I was able to align the text whether to the left or to the center. I can click here. I will have access to more information or to more options. So I can here wrap the text, I can shrink it, I can even change the orientation. So even if I want it to be like that, I can change it. Now this might seem like normal, but believe me, when you have a huge table, it's very nice to have the flexibility to align the text that you would like to, as we will see in the later on examples. Now, if we move on to the next tab, Insert, you'll be able to insert tables, you'll be able to insert shapes. So I'm going to be selecting shapes and I will select a simple circle. Of course, I can draw a circle by holding the left mouse button. But if I want it to be a perfect circle, while I'm still holding the button, I can just click Shift and hold it, and I will be able to make it bigger or smaller, and it will be a perfect circle. Same thing applies to any other shape, whether it was a square or a triangle. You'll be able to do that by holding the Shift button, and it will be a proper measurement of that shape. If you have noticed that the moment we selected the shape, a new menu have appeared or a new tab have appeared. Now this would happen depending on the sort of type of data that you're dealing with, whether it was shapes, tables or graphs, and we will see many examples in the future. So this tab will be specific to the thing that we're dealing with. In this case, it is the shape, and the same thing applies. So when I select the shape, I can change the color of the shape, I can change the color of the font inside the shape. If I want to add the outline, how thick do I want the outline, or I don't want it at all, what color is it, what's the height, what's the width, if you want it in proper measurement. And it gives you again all the flexibility if you want to go to the extra menu and be able to change things according to the shape that you want to make. And that takes us to the third tab, which is page layout. Now, from its name, page layout, it means that you can change the layout in terms of size, in terms of margins, if you want to be doing, to be printing the content of the sheets later on, and also the orientation. So depending on the reports or depending on the data that you're dealing with, some people like to present the data in a portrait manner or in a landscape manner. Of course, the size of the papers can change, and this has to do very much with print. You can add a background to the sheet, and of course, it will give you many other options here. I will move to formulas, and this is, I believe, one of the most important things or important tabs in Excel, or functions, let's call it. I'm going to break it down to you very simply. I like to think of Excel as having an amazing personal assistant. What do I mean by that? Assuming I am your amazing personal assistant and you came to me and you asked me, you said, Anas, would you please tell me how much or what's the total of our sales of the year 2015? So I will be able to go to Excel and write equal sum. So I will look for the sum of the number of sales that I have. Or I'm going to click escape. Or I can go to formulas and I can choose auto sum, and I will look for the sum. You notice that Excel itself wrote the formula, and then I will be able to select the cells that I want. Or I can actually type the range, as we have learned before, of the cells. So as an example, if our sales are in K12 all the way to K45. Just for the example, just for the sake of the example. So I will be able to type it out, and it doesn't have to be only vertical, it can cover more. So I can say from K12 to J45. So it will be, of course, it's 0 because there is no data in those cells. So back to the example of the personal assistant. In Excel, every formula will be able to do a certain function. If you want the sum or to count, not only in numbers. So now all the examples that we've given are mathematical related. If you want to add, subtract, or find the count, it can be text. So you would like to find a certain text or a certain barcode or a certain color. Think of anything that can come up to your mind in terms of manipulating data and digging up in the tables. Excel will be able to find it. And also you can combine formulas. What do I mean by that? You can tell me, again to the example that I'm your personal assistant, you would tell me, Anas, I would like to know what is the total sales of 2015 and the total sales of 2017. So I can have the sum of two formulas. Or if you would like to know the total sales of 2015 multiplied by the average profit margin of the same year. Now, of course, I'm taking the most simplistic examples, but you can actually build up on that formula if you're using if statements, VLOOKUPs, as we will see in the future. A word of advice, never be intimidated by the way the formula looks, because it can be one of two options. Option number one, that it is poorly written and it can be written in a much more simple manner, or it can be the combination of many different formulas at the same time. So what do I mean by that? I have just written some random numbers. An example of a poorly written formula, I can say equal, and then I'll select a cell plus this cell plus this cell plus. Now, I will keep on doing that. Does that mean it works? Will it give me the correct answer? The answer is yes. But is it the best way to write a formula? Obviously not. So I can say equal sum, open bracket, and then I will select the cells, as we have seen. And as you have seen, in every cell, if I wanted to be a computation cell, meaning like this cell will do a certain formula or a certain function, I always start with the equal sign. Because if I just wrote sum and I open bracket, you see nothing is going to happen. Excel will not understand, it will just think that this cell has letters and numbers. But the moment I start by writing equal, Excel will understand that this is a formula, and once I click enter, it's going to be applying it. Moving on to the next tab, and I'm pretty sure you'll be able to discover, and I encourage you not to be afraid. Click on different tabs, see what does every single button do. You can go to review, you can go, and even help is actually a very important part of Excel. I still, until today, use it. So if I'm looking for an explanation of a certain formula, let's assume I'm looking for the VLOOKUP formula, which is a very famous formula that basically looks for information. So you would tell me, there's a table that has the name of the students, and you would tell Excel, VLOOKUP, Anas, so I am the thing that you're looking for. And what do you want to find? The information regarding Anas, I want to find his marks, or his attendance, or his date of birth, whatever sort of information. So if you did not know anything about the VLOOKUP formula, you can actually go to the help, write VLOOKUP, and Excel will have an explanation for it, and sometimes it might have a reference video. So obviously we're all humans and we're not going to be remembering all the formulas that we ever used in Excel. So the help part is actually helpful, with the irony of the word. So now we're back to the beginning where we have started. Once you open Excel, you're going to be landing at this page. We have clicked on blank workbook to start from scratch. But very important tip is that, as they say, you don't always need to reinvent the wheel. So as an example, I want to be organizing my calendar on Excel. Instead of going and building it up and aligning it, I can just start, go to the templates, write calendar, and click enter to search, and I will be able to find pre-made calendars. So depending on the type or the utility, is it going to be a to-do list? Is it going to be a daily or a monthly? I'm just going to be selecting a random one here. You can see a brief about it. You can see how does it look like. If you like it, all what you have to do is just simply click create, and you will be able to start editing it. As you can see, it's very well organized, it's color coded, and in the beginning here, you can actually select the year. So you can say the year is 2022, and you can say the week starts whether it was on Sunday or whether it starts on Monday, and you can see all the adjustments happen automatically. You don't really need to do it. Now, this saves you a ton of time, and I'm a huge advocate for this. What do I mean by that? The point of why we use Excel is just like how we use any other sort of technology. We want our process to be faster, to be more efficient. So I like to think in a quote-unquote lazy way. Like if I am at point A, I want to get to point B, I like to find the simplest, most shortest distances that will take me from point A to point B. So same thing when we are solving problems in Excel or trying to get to a certain data. Instead of using 7 formulas, I would itch my head and be like, how can I do it in 1? Or how can I do it in 2? But again, there is a very thin line that you would get to, is that you would over-engineer things, and you just need to find the right balance on where to stop. And of course, with experience and doing your tasks over and over again, you're going to be creating your own methods on how to solve problems. So as an example, if I told you, how can I get to the number 5? You can say it can be 4 plus 1, or it can be 2 plus 2 plus 1, or it can be 2.5 multiplied by 2, or it can be 100 minus 95. All of these can get you the result of number 5. Now, it all depends on how does your brain work and how do you see problems and how do you see solutions, and whatever works with you. There is no right, there is no wrong, there is just your method and what works with you. Now, with that said, we are going to start working on our first sheet, and during all of my episodes, whenever there is a shortcut that's very useful, I'm going to be mentioning it and I'm going to be highlighting how to do it on the screen. So first things first, you select any cell. If you want to go down, you can click enter. If you want to go to the cell above, you can click shift enter. And if you want to go to the right, you can click tab. If you want to go to the left or to the previous cell, you can click shift tab. Or if you would like, if you're using a keyboard, you can just simply click the arrows and go wherever you want. I know it's not really related to Excel, but I highly recommend using a full keyboard, meaning that you have the numpad on the right, especially that you're going to be punching in so many numbers. It will be just easier than using the ones on top, and of course having a mouse. So this workflow will just make your process even faster. It's just a word of advice. I've used it, everyone used it, and it turned out to be really useful. And you will notice that with time, whenever you start getting better and better in Excel, you will less use the mouse. There's no point, it's not about showing off. I know there are so many memes online about it, but in all honesty, when there's less travel between those simple half a second or microseconds, if you compile it on a span of a week, it will turn up to be hours. So just make your work more efficient and much faster. The first important tip, shortcut, or call it whatever you want, is that when you want to edit a certain cell. So I'm going to be selecting this cell, I will write my name in it and I click enter. Now, if I go back to the cell and I would like to add to my name, I would like to add my family name. If I just simply start typing, it is going to be overriding whatever was in that cell. So we're going to click undo or Control Z. Now, I can access it in various ways. Way number one is that I would bring the mouse and I would double click. And you would notice that now I can edit. So I can click space and add my family name. If I want to escape, meaning I want to go back to whatever the cell was, not delete it, I'll just click escape, and any sort of edit that I made to the cell is gonna go away. Now, I can access it in the second way, where I can simply select the cell, go up, click here, and edit and write whatever I want. Now, you notice that I've used the mouse. If you want the faster method, I'm going to be clicking Ctrl Z. The faster method is that when I go to any cell on Excel, I will click F2, and then you can immediately edit and write whatever you want in it. Funny story about this, I have learned this almost 2.5 years after I started learning Excel. And it was one of the most major pivoting points in my Excel journey of how much it saved me time, this simple F2 button. Moving on, about the width and the height of each and every individual cell. Now, as we have seen before, that my name have gone over 2 cells. Now, this might look fine at the moment, but if I would come to the neighboring cell or the cell on its right, and I would write any information, 2022, and I would click enter, you would notice that I no longer see the content in that cell. Now, again, there are many ways that you can solve this. Way number 1 is that you would select it, and then you would go up to the width of the column, and you can just manually start moving it until you find the width that works with you. There's a nice shortcut. If I click Ctrl Z, there's a nice shortcut. If I double click here, you notice how the mouse changes. When I double click here, it's going to be making the whole column, the width, fit to the biggest cell. What do I mean by that? I'm going to be writing here, the best course on YouTube. And I'm going here to write here, please make sure you subscribe and like this video. Now, we have 3 different widths here in the cells or in the same column. If I simply double click here, it's going to be taking the biggest cell and make it fit. So you'll be able to see all the content at the same time. Now, same thing applies for the width. Now, since we are all writing in one line, we can actually make this bigger by going here and pulling it down. So now I can see both lines. If I want to go down, notice if I click enter, it's going to take me to the below cell. Now, I want to go down in the same cell, and I believe this is, again, one of the most important things I learned in Excel. Once you are editing inside the cell, hold Alt, then Enter. That will take you in the below line in the same cell. So I'm going to be writing, make sure to leave a comment and tell us what do you think about the video. Now, notice how Excel have automatically made it bigger, but if it was actually small, assuming, and I was checking the cells and I noticed that, oh, there's more information that I cannot see. Same thing, I'm going to be putting the mouse here. You notice that it changes. Double click with the mouse, and then it works. So now we have seen one method of how to fix that, the overlapping of the cells in another cell. So I'm going to be creating a random table right now. I'm going to be saying the alumni class of 2022. Now, this is the header of the table. Now, if I make this bigger, it is going to be visible, but it will not be part of the year of the graduation. It will not be with the student ID or whatever. Now, I've made a mistake here, and I've intentionally made this mistake. Why? Because I'm going to be putting the year here, and in this cell, it should say name. So now I can move this in multiple ways. I can right-click, cut, and right-click and paste here. Okay, or I'm going to be clicking Ctrl Z, escape. Okay. Now, oh, by the way, something worth mentioning. If you copy, you will notice this dotted line that this cell have been copied or cut. So if I click Ctrl X for cut or Ctrl C for copy, you will see that it's highlighted. The moment I click escape, it's going to be taking it away. I can select it, and I can. You see when you get this moving sign on the mouse, I just hold it with the mouse, push it up. Simple as that. Because here we will have the name, and here we will have the student ID as an example. So I'm going to be calling this 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Now, as we were saying, that I want this to be the header of my table. there's a very nice option. You go to Home, and then you will find something called Merge and Center. So I will click on it, and from what it says, it's going to be merging the cells, and it's going to be centering that content. And now, if I would like to, I can actually select all three and do the adjustments for them by making all the content central aligned. If I just want, I'm going to be undoing. If I wanted to just be for the header and the contents of the table, I would just select it from the rows and then central it. So now if I will add any information, I'm going to be saying, as an example, I'm going to be writing major, let's say finance. Now, since this is out of the table, I can merge and center and then highlight it again and merge and center again. And of course, you can start populating the table the way that you would like to. So from the things that we learned before, I usually like to come here and then make it a different color just to differentiate it, and make it bold again to differentiate it. If you found at any point in time where you're working with Excel that the cells are a bit small, you can't see very clearly, you can just go down here and scroll this to the right for you to zoom. Or if you're using the keyboard and mouse, you can just hold the Control button and start scrolling up and down to find the view that works with you the most. So that's point number one. Point number two, I personally like to do is to add borders in order to differentiate the data that we're working with. So if I would just highlight this and go here, the type of borders that I like to select is all borders. And since I promised you to give you useful tips about the shortcuts, I'm going to be clicking Ctrl Z. You might see some people who might click things so fast on the keyboard and they look like they are hackers or programmers from the Matrix movie. But in all honesty, it's very simple tips and tricks. So if I select at any point inside the table and I click Ctrl A, that's for select all, you will notice that it selected all the content inside that table only. But if I was outside the table and I clicked Ctrl A, it's going to be selecting the whole sheet or the whole working sheet. That's not useful for me because I don't want to have borders on all the sheet. This is just going to be too confusing for my eyes. I'm going to click undo. So wherever I am inside the table, I'm just going to be clicking Ctrl A. The shortcuts have a simple method for any shortcut in Excel. You click Alt once. You're going to notice that now we have numbers and we have letters here. So if I want to go to Home, I'm going to be clicking H. Now, after I clicked H, it took me to the next step. I can select anything I want, whether I want to cut. If I want to cut, I'm going to click X. If I want to copy, I'll click C. But in this case, I want borders. The button or the letter for borders is B. So I'm going to click B. And then if I want to select all borders is A, or if I don't want any borders, I'll use N. So if I want all borders, I'll click A. And we will notice that the borders have happened. Now, since I explained it, it might look that it's taking too long, but if I do it in real time, it's as simple as that. I'm going to do it again slowly. So what I have done is Control A, selected them, Alt, H, B, A. I'll share with you a small story here. When I first started learning the shortcuts, I used to have post-it notes next to my monitor with the most important and the highly used shortcuts. So when people used to come, they used to find HBA, HOI, HAC, HLH, AC, ARM, and they used to say like, what sort of hieroglyphic language or encrypted language that you're writing? What do those mean? And I was like, well, to me, they make sense because I'm using these shortcuts. And then it became second nature to me that I don't even look at the keyboard. I don't even think about the shortcuts just because of how many times I've used them. So in terms of making the table, aligning it, and this is shortcut number 2, is that I would select them all and I would say Alt, H, O, I. The funny thing is, I remember this with a Chinese sound effect, like, you know, the ones from the Kung Fu movies. It's like Alt Hua, Alt HOI. It's just funny in my head. You don't really need to use the same sound effects in your mind, but for me, simply what I've done is Control A, meaning select all, Alt H, so I went to home, and format O, and then I selected I, meaning that it's going to be auto adjusting the column width. So here, as an example, the name is too wide. I'm not going to be selecting B and fixing it and selecting C and fixing it. So simply when I click Alt HOI, auto adjust, it's going to be auto adjusting them. And now I just brought a random set of data for us to manipulate and show you a bit more options in Excel. Now, since we have spoken about the sheets, I can have new sheets, as many as I want. So I'm going to be calling this row data. I'm going to be calling this graphs, and I will call this pivot table. You don't really need to use my method. I'm just showing this for example purposes. You can actually have all three contents in one sheet, but usually I like to segregate the sheets in order to make it easier to work with. So I will have a separate sheet just for graphs, a separate sheet just for pivot tables, and a sheet just for row data. Usually the raw data, I would have it in a separate color. So let's say as an example, green, or orange, or any color that you like, just simply to make it different. So whenever I have a glance on the file, I will be able to see where I'm at. Now, once you're done with dealing with the raw data, let's assume that you want to hide it. You don't want to delete it, but you want to hide it. Just for people who are all going to open the file, they won't be able to manipulate or play with the raw data to have the data integrity. So just for the sake of this example, I'm going to be right-clicking here, and then I'll click on hide. So you will notice that the sheet is no longer visible. It's not deleted, but if I want to find it again, all what I have to do is just simply right-click on any of the sheets, unhide, select that sheet. If you want to change the name of the sheet, simply just double-click, write whatever you want. If you want to change the color, you can right-click, change the tab color. If you want to protect it, like with a password, so people cannot even edit, we're gonna get to that. Of course, Excel gives you that option. So now the raw data looks a bit dull in my opinion. So usually what I like to do, I like to select them all by doing this, or just like how we have learned, I can just click anywhere in the table, click Control A, make them centered, and I like the header of the table to be in bold, to have it in a different color, just to differentiate it. And also we can select them all and do the Alt HBA, meaning that we're going to give them all borders. For the sales, now this is the interesting part. Excel can give you the option to differentiate the format of the cell. Now in some cells you might have text, in some cells you might have a number, but that number even might be different types of format. So it might be a date, it might be a currency, it might be a percentage. So not all numbers are the same. Just like in text, it can be also a date, it can be anything that you want. So if I select here, the sales, I want them to be in dollars. So I can select the cell. On top here is the format of the cell. So if I select it, you will see that we have numbers, currency, accounting, short date, time, percentage, doesn't matter. Now, if I select currency, since I'm living in Dubai, our currency is Arab Emirati Dirham, or AED. If you want a different currency, there's a shortcut here for the most used currency. So as an example, US dollars, British pound, euro, Chinese yen, or RMB. Now, I can change it from here, select dollars. You would see that we have decimals, but technically our numbers are rounded up. So again, for my eyes, I don't like to see the decimals. From here, you can actually decrease the number of decimals or increase the number of decimals, depending on the data that you have and whatever works with you. Personally speaking, I don't like decimals. I like them to be rounded up. Now, is it really useful that I'm going to be selecting each and every cell and change them to dollar? The answer is no. Now, I can select the whole D column, but that means even the format of this cell is going to be dollars. It's not really a big deal since it's text, but I don't like that. We can use the mouse to highlight them all, okay, and change them all to dollars, and then change the decimal points and make them smaller. This is actually, I call it the magical button. I'm going to be doing undo. What do I mean by the magical button? Now, I have formatted this cell the way that I like to, in terms of format. I want it to be in dollars. I want it to have no decimals. The magic button is this button, the Format Painter, meaning what Excel does, once I click it, you will see that it's highlighted with a paintbrush, meaning any single cell I would select after this point, it's like a magic wand or a magic brush, it's going to be applying the same sort of settings. So now, if I highlight those, notice how the brush is still there. When I highlight them, they are all going to change to the same format of the cell in terms of font size, bold, italic, format, how many decimals, whatever it is, it's going to be doing that. So moving on with what we learned, we can change the ratings, and ratings here are in percentages. So if I want to make this in the percentage, I can just simply go here, select the format, or there's a small button here, it's called percentage. So I select the cell, I click on percentage, and it changes it to a percentage sign. If I want to flip it back to be a normal decimal, I can just click on the comma here, and it will flip it back to the way it was. So I'm going to be selecting percentage, and from what we learned, I can click Format Painter. If you want the shortcut, just like what we have learned, Alt, so it is in Home, it's H, and Format Painter is FP, Format Painter, FP. And you would see that it worked. Now, you would ask, how can I do this with no mouse? How can I select them all with no mouse? If I click the arrow down, it's going to be selecting just the cell under it. But actually, in Excel, if you want to select the whole column, I can hold the Shift button before the Format Painter. So this applies whether you're doing the Format Painter or not. If I hold the Shift button and I click down, I'll select the cell under it. If I click Shift and Control and then I click down, it will keep on selecting cells until the last filled up cell. So the last cell with data that is filled up with data is cell E76. Notice how it did not select E77. But if I select Shift Control and I click down again, it's going to go all the way to the bottom of the sheet. And honestly, that's an overkill. There's a general rule of thumb, it might not make so much sense right now, is that only populate the cells that you're going to use. So as an example, if I applied a percentage formula here, all right, the sheet all the way down here is formatted. This is unnecessary data on the Excel file, and in the future, once you have more data, it's just going to make this heavier on your PC, it's going to make it slower. So I would say undo, all right? Just simply click Shift, so select the cell, hold Shift, hold Control, and click down. Now, if you want to select the row, hold Shift, hold Control, go right or go left. If you want to select them all, go left, then hold Control and Shift, and then go down. So this is very important when you want to move around. Now, this is while we are selecting. Let's assume you want to go to the last cell in the bottom or the top or the right or the left. You can just hold the Control button and then click down, click left, click right. You see, we are here right now. So if I hold Control and go left, it's gonna go all the way left. If I'm gonna go right, it will go to the last cell that has information. So meaning, this is a test, okay? What do I mean by this? If I click here and I click Control right, it's gonna go to this cell, E76. It's not gonna go to G76. Unless I click right again while I'm holding Control, it's gonna go there. If I keep holding Control and I go right, it's gonna take me to the end of the sheet. So I hope this makes sense. Try it on your file, try playing with it until you get familiar with it. So now you will notice that I'm going to be doing this without touching the mouse. So I can just go up, hold Shift, hold Control, highlight them all. If I want to use the shortcut, Alt, H. I don't know what's the percentage shortcut, it's P. So I clicked P and it worked. If I want to have even decimals in the percentage, we have learned before, we can add decimals or we can decrease the number of decimals. Now I'm going to be showing you two simple formulas, yet they are so effective. So now you want to know your total sales. There are two ways, or many ways actually, but two ways that I usually would use. Now I'm going to be showing you two formulas that I use them almost on a daily basis, the sum or the total and the average. So once I click equal, there's a very nice thing in Excel. The moment I start writing, it will show me all the possible formulas that I can write. So whatever sort of formula that starts with the letter SU. So the one I'm looking for is sum. I don't need to continue the whole formula. All what I have to do is just simply click tab once and it has selected that formula. I can select the sales by clicking Control Shift down, so I don't need to be dragging them all. So this is the total, and I can say if I want the average of the rating equal AV, we see here the average. I'm going to be clicking tab, I will go left, hold Shift, Control, and this is the average of the rating. So I'm going to say average rating. Excel was smart enough to know that this is our header and it chose the same format of the cell. So if I want to say total sales, it took the same, but it is still missing the border. So I can just highlight them, Alt H B A, or slowly I can just go to home, manually click here and choose all borders. Now, since I have chosen all borders, it saved it here. It will always save the last thing. So if I've chosen thick borders, it will have thick borders here. So whenever I want, this is the last used one, I can just click it. Or if I've used all borders, I don't need to drop down the menu. I can just simply click all borders and then it will do that. I really hope you found this useful and we were able to break the ice or that fear from the program that it's a very easy to use, very simple program that is created to make our lives easier. If you have reached to this part of the episode, I truly thank you for your time. I really hope you found this useful. If you're not subscribed, please do, and please do share this video with the ones that you think they will find this beneficial. In the next episodes, we're going to be digging deeper into the formulas, the graphs, and the ways that we can manipulate the data. And to make it easier for you, if you have any questions, make sure to include it in the comments below, and I will be able to address them in the next video and have them solved as example. My name is Anas Shatara, and you've been watching the Shatara channel. See you soon.